Welcome back to Wrestling Sphere, where we bring you the most dramatic and authentic stories from the world of wrestling. When people think of WWE, they usually imagine electrifying performances, hard-hitting clashes, and storylines crafted with precision. But there are men who, even when the spotlight fades, remain individuals nobody dares to cross. Not because of fame, but because of their toughness, courage, and iron will forged through countless battles both inside the ring and in real life. In today's video, we'll look back at some of the most notorious names, wrestlers who even the boldest challengers thought twice about confronting. Harley Race, the man even the locker room feared. Harley Race's life is a living testament to resilience. As a child, he faced polio, a disease that could rob anyone of the ability to walk. But Harley refused to surrender. He overcame it and grew to become one of wrestling's greatest legends, immortalized in the WWE Hall of Fame, remembered as an unbreakable warrior. He didn't just defeat illness. He also survived cancer and a devastating car accident that nearly ended his life. For Harley, adversity wasn't an enemy. It was the fire that forged his toughness and indomitable spirit. During the brutal territory days, where competition between regions was fierce, Harley stood out as one of the toughest men alive. Countless backstage stories speak of his fearlessness. Even Andre the Giant, a man most wouldn't dare provoke, showed respect for Harley. That alone proves just how much authority and danger he carried behind his quiet demeanor. Harley was infamous for always carrying a gun, and he never hid it. Hulk Hogan once recalled a chilling incident when WWF expanded into Kansas City, Harley's stronghold for nearly 20 years. Angered by the move, Harley allegedly stormed the arena armed. Hogan remembered the fear when he heard Harley was looking for him with a gun. The tension peaked when Hogan came face to face with him in the hallway, staring down the barrel. In that instant, Hogan thought his career and life was over. But instead of pulling the trigger, Harley lowered the gun and said coldly, "I should end you right here. But the truth is, I need a job." That life-or-death moment left Hogan shaken, but also deeply respectful. Years later, he admitted he always held Harley in a special regard, a man as dangerous as he was captivating. And Hogan wasn't the only one to witness Harley's fury. Lawman Don Slatton, a notorious promoter in West Texas, once tried to set Harley up in a Russian chain match. Harley caught wind of it, and when the bell rang, he turned the tables. He wrapped the chain around Slatton and dragged him across the floor, humiliating him and crushing his scheme. It was a raw display of Harley's vigilance and fire, proof he was never anyone's victim. What made Harley truly intimidating wasn't size or muscles, but his refusal to back down. He wouldn't hesitate to fight anyone, fellow wrestlers or even rowdy fans. On one occasion, he fended off an entire biker gang after a show. For most, that would be a nightmare. For Harley, it was just another night's work. Yet behind the gruff and dangerous exterior, Harley Race was respected as a legend with a softer side. Tough on the outside but kind-hearted within, he loved wrestling and valued friendship. His life was a series of grueling trials, but those very struggles made him immortal, a name no one in the business ever dared to underestimate. Steve Blackman, a lethal weapon in real life. In WWE, many wrestlers were given flashy nicknames, but for Steve Blackman, the lethal weapon wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was the truth. With a background in martial arts, Blackman mastered multiple disciplines and possessed astonishing endurance. In the ring, he was cold, stoic, and no-nonsense, but behind the curtain, everyone knew he was one of the few men no one dared to mess with. His danger became most evident during the infamous Brawl for All tournament, a brutal event where wrestlers fought for real instead of following a script. Bob Holly later revealed that Blackman's mere presence forced organizers to impose stricter rules. In one preparatory meeting, Blackman casually asked, "So basically, if I want, I can just break my opponent's knee, right?" It sounded simple, but it terrified management, because they knew he could actually do it. The thought that one careless move from him could end someone's career, or their life, was enough to rattle the entire locker room. And Blackman's reputation didn't stop inside the ring. Backstage, stories of his strength spread quickly. Even Big Show, a 7-foot giant, once found himself effortlessly taken down by Blackman. But the tale that shook WWE's locker room the most was his confrontation with JBL. Everyone knew JBL as a notorious bully, using his size and influence to intimidate others. That night, however, he He picked the wrong target. It happened on the tragic evening of Owen Hart's death, when emotions were already running high. After JBL made a snide remark, Blackman snapped. According to Road Dogg, Val Venis, and Bob Holly, it wasn't even a fight. Within seconds, JBL was flat on the ground, helpless. The only reason it didn't end much worse was a small stroke of luck. Blackman's leg got tangled in the strap of a nearby bag, preventing him from landing a devastating final blow. Afterward, Blackman told JBL bluntly, "If it weren't for that bag, you'd be in intensive care right now." Word of the incident spread fast, and from then on, no one dared push Blackman's patience again. In WWE, where many tried to show off or pick fights to prove themselves, Steve Blackman stood out in a completely different way. He didn't boast, he didn't stir drama, but everyone who saw him in action understood. He was the real deal, a living weapon you never wanted to cross. Rick Rude, ravishing but dangerous in real life. Don't let the slick hair and polished appearance fool you. Rick Rude, known as Ravishing, is remembered as one of the most charismatic men in WWE history. But beneath the suave exterior was a fierce, aggressive fighter who never backed down from a challenge. Many of his wildest brawls didn't happen in the ring at all, but in bars. Before becoming a pro wrestler, Rude worked as a bar bouncer. That job meant constant run-ins with drunks and troublemakers, and it sharpened his appetite for real fights. Unlike most who fought only when forced, Rude actively sought them out. Bruce Pritchard once shared that Rick and his girlfriend would intentionally walk into bars, letting men hit on her. When things escalated, Rude used it as the perfect excuse to throw down. For him, it was less a job than a pastime. That aggression carried over into wrestling as well. In WWE, if Rude felt disrespected, he didn't hesitate to use his fists. One of the most famous stories involves a backstage clash with the Ultimate Warrior. There are two versions of what happened, but both paint the same picture. Rude wasn't someone you could ignore. According to one account, Warrior dismissed Rude as unworthy of holding the Intercontinental Championship. Enraged, Rude attacked him, knocking the muscular star flat backstage. The more widely told version says Rude grew frustrated because Warrior hit too stiffly in the ring, disregarding his opponent's safety. When Warrior brushed off his complaints, Rude dropped him with a perfectly placed punch. Whichever version you believe, the point is clear. Rick Rude was more than just a bodybuilder who strutted for the crowd. In the ring, he seduced audiences with his flamboyant persona, but backstage, he earned respect through raw toughness. For Rude, putting someone in their place wasn't just a reaction, it was a habit, a way of asserting dominance. And maybe that's what made him so captivating yet intimidating, the strange mix of charm and menace. He was the kind of man who could knock you out in seconds, and then steal your girlfriend right after. With Rick Rude, strength and allure always went hand in hand, making him a figure both admired and feared. Brock Lesnar, the beast nobody dares to anger. If there's one man who perfectly embodies the image of a true monster in wrestling, it's Brock Lesnar. With his massive frame, freakish power, and icy, intimidating stare, Lesnar never needed his UFC accolades to prove how dangerous he was. Just a glance, or the sound of his footsteps, was enough to send shivers through WWE's backstage. What makes Lesnar stand out for most stars is his reclusive nature and outright disdain for people. In a conversation with Stone Cold Steve Austin, he openly admitted that he lives in a remote area, far from city life, just to avoid crowds. Lesnar has no interest in being a fan-friendly idol, nor in forced social interactions. He even once said that if a WWE staff member tried to make him sign an autograph at the wrong time, his fist to their face would be the only answer. That short fuse led to countless stories of colleagues learning to tread carefully around him. The most infamous example was the plane ride from hell. On that flight, veteran Curt Hennig pushed Lesnar too far, provoking him until the beast snapped. The two erupted into a brawl that turned the cabin into a war zone. Witnesses knew that if things had gone on for just a few more seconds, Hennig could have paid a very steep price. Even giants didn't intimidate him. At Royal Rumble 2018, when Braun Strowman accidentally struck him too hard, Lesnar immediately retaliated with real punches, holding nothing back. That moment made it crystal clear. No matter how big you were, if you crossed the line, you'd feel the wrath of the beast. What surprises many is that even Vince McMahon himself once faced Lesnar's fury. After his WrestleMania 34 match with Roman Reigns, Brock was so enraged that he hurled the Universal Championship belt straight at Vince the moment he walked backstage. That scene became one of the clearest reminders: Lesnar fears no one, not even the man signing his paycheck. To be fair, Brock Lesnar isn't a villain. He's simply blunt, direct, and never hides his frustration or anger. That honesty makes him one of a kind in wrestling, a fighter respected by all, but also feared by everyone. When it comes to Brock Lesnar, there's only one accurate description: a beast in every sense of the word, both inside and outside the ring. Haku, the man who intimidated the entire wrestling world. Among the names whispered with fear backstage in WWE, Haku is always near the top. Though his career in WWE, WCW, and New Japan Pro Wrestling never reached the spotlight of the industry's biggest stars, his reputation was built on something different: absolute danger. He never needed championship belts to earn respect. Every story about Haku served as proof of his near-superhuman strength and unshakable toughness. One of the most famous tales involved Brutus, the barber, Beefcake. After Beefcake complained to management that Haku was hitting too hard in the ring, he quickly paid the price. Without a wordy confrontation, Haku stormed into the locker room showers and attacked him, sending a clear message: never mess with him. It wasn't random violence. It was Haku establishing his place in a business where toughness was the only true currency. But that wasn't even the wildest story. The barroom legends surrounding Haku are the stuff of myth. In one brawl, he reportedly shoved his fingers into an opponent's mouth and ripped out teeth with his bare hands. It sounds like something from an action movie, but in Haku's case, it was just another story added to his long list of terrifying feats. And if that sounds extreme, imagine taking on an entire squad of police officers. In one infamous incident, Haku found himself in a bar fight that escalated until 8 police officers tried to subdue him. They resorted to pepper spray, which usually blinds and incapacitates instantly. But according to Rick Steiner, who witnessed it, Haku inhaled the spray straight into his lungs as if it had no effect. Steiner later called him the toughest man in the world, and countless wrestlers agreed. What made Haku unique was that he never tried to act scary. By nature, he was humble and kind. But if provoked, his fury erupted like a storm. That's why, whether backstage or in everyday life, just hearing his name was enough for everyone to admit Haku was not a man you ever wanted to cross. Road Warriors, fearless warriors who bowed to no one. To earn the respect of even someone like Haku, you had to be incredibly tough in the wrestling world. That description fits Hawk and Animal perfectly, the duo that became the Road Warriors, known in WWE as the Legion of Doom. They weren't just one of the greatest tag teams of all time. Outside the ring, they carried an aura that made people tread carefully around them. Throughout their careers, the Road Warriors were seen as the very definition of brute force and raw intensity. With spiked shoulder pads and painted warrior faces, they created an unmistakable image that became iconic. But what truly set them apart was their real-life attitude: blunt, outspoken, and unafraid of conflict. Hawk and Animal were known for saying exactly what they thought, even if that meant angering Vince McMahon, the most powerful man in wrestling. Their first WWE run lasted only 2 years.
Why?
Because they were forced into a gimmick involving Rocco, a talking puppet, which they considered such a ridiculous idea that it insulted their legacy. Without hesitation, they walked out, refusing to let anything tarnish the Road Warriors' name, no matter the professional consequences. Their second WWE stint didn't go any better. The company created an angle around Hawk's real-life struggles with substance abuse, even scripting him to appear drunk on TV and fall from the Titantron. For Hawk and Animal, exploiting a man's personal tragedy for ratings was beyond unacceptable. They quit soon after, leaving with nothing but disappointment and disgust at WWE's approach. Sadly, their legendary run couldn't last forever. Hawk passed away in 2003 from a heart attack, leaving a void in the hearts of fans worldwide. Animal continued on his own until his passing in 2020. Even though both are gone, their legacy, in the ring and backstage, remains immortal. What colleagues remember most about the Road Warriors wasn't just their classic matches or countless tag team titles. It was their fearless personalities. They stood their ground, and if they felt disrespected, they weren't afraid to settle things physically. Stories even suggest that if pushed far enough, Hawk or Animal would throw a punch at the boss himself. And in a place like WWE, where Vince McMahon's authority was nearly absolute, That kind of defiance proved just how tough they truly were. The Road Warriors will forever be remembered as real warriors, not just inside the squared circle, but in life. They didn't fear scripts, they didn't fear management, and they certainly didn't fear anyone who dared challenge them. Ron Simmons, the untouchable badass. When fans think of Ron Simmons, they often picture him alongside JBL in the APA, or as a member of the Nation of Domination. On screen, he always came across as tough, no-nonsense, and fearless. But what made him truly special wasn't just a character crafted by WWE. It was the fact that Simmons lived and breathed that persona in real life. Kurt Angle once said on his podcast that nobody dared mess with Simmons in the locker room. The reason was simple. If Simmons got angry, he could drop anyone in an instant. In a business full of scripted drama, Angle repeated this point more than once, making it clear that Simmons was legitimately dangerous. Arn Anderson, another respected veteran, backed this up. According to him, even the Steiner brothers, who had a reputation for being wild and aggressive, never once tried to cross Simmons. They knew that a single misstep could cost them dearly. In an environment as ruthless as WWE, being universally recognized as off-limits said everything. Unlike Haku, who built his reputation through legendary bar fight stories, Simmons didn't need over-the-top tales to prove himself. A few backstage encounters and stiff moments in the ring were enough to show everyone not to test him. One of the clearest examples came during APA's infamous match against Public Enemy on Sunday Night Heat. Public Enemy, once tag team champions in ECW and WCW, entered WWE with what was seen as a disrespectful attitude. The response was immediate. That night, APA, especially Ron Simmons, took the gloves off. JBL later admitted they treated it as a real fight from the opening bell. What followed was a one-sided beatdown, with Public Enemy mauled like prey in the middle of the ring. The match became a prime example of how Simmons and the APA enforced respect backstage. What made Simmons even scarier was his calmness. He wasn't loud or showy, but when he decided to act, it was swift and decisive. To his peers, he was both a respected veteran and an immovable force no one dared challenge. In other words, the badass persona fans saw on TV wasn't fiction, it was the real Ron Simmons. And that's why he'll always be remembered as one of the few men in wrestling that nobody dared cross. The Undertaker, the Phantom who commanded backstage respect. When it comes to names no one dared to cross outside the ring, The Undertaker stands at the very top. The immortal dead man wasn't intimidating only because of his character, but because of his aura and authority in real life. He was never known for picking bar fights or looking for trouble. Instead, he carried a presence that demanded respect while keeping people from ever wanting to test him. One of the most famous stories is the time he choked out Kurt Angle during a grappling session on a plane. Angle, an Olympic gold medalist with unmatched amateur wrestling skills, liked to push himself against anyone. But when he decided to play around with The Undertaker, the dead man reacted instantly, locked him in, and knocked him unconscious in seconds. That moment proved that behind the supernatural persona was a legitimately tough fighter who couldn't be underestimated. But Undertaker's true power didn't come just from his combat skills. It came from his role in WWE's locker room. According to Jim Cornette and many former wrestlers, Undertaker was long regarded as the unofficial leader of the roster. Not because he yelled or bullied people, but because of his professionalism, loyalty to the business, and his ability to put the company and his peers above himself. The clearest example of his leadership came during the infamous 1997 Montreal Screwjob. After Bret Hart was double-crossed by Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels, it was Undertaker who demanded Vince face Bret directly instead of hiding behind others. That action showed his concern not only for the business but also for the dignity of his fellow wrestlers. He also confronted Shawn Michaels at the height of Michaels' arrogance. Before WrestleMania 14, when Michaels resisted dropping the title to Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker coldly warned him that if he didn't do business the right way, there would be consequences. The result, Michaels followed through, and WrestleMania history was made. What set Undertaker apart was that he never abused his position. He didn't bully or throw his weight around. He maintained discipline in the locker room while making sure everyone trusted that if something unfair happened, he would step in. Quiet but firm, he was someone nobody dared challenge. Outside the ring, his mystique grew even stronger by keeping his personal life hidden for decades. Fans only saw the dead man, rarely Mark Calloway, the man behind the character. That secrecy only amplified his legendary aura, making him a figure of both fear and admiration. When he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2022, the entire wrestling world acknowledged him not just as a performer but as the soul of WWE for generations. His combination of real toughness, respect backstage, and leadership cemented him as one of the rare few nobody ever dared to mess with. The Undertaker wasn't just the Lord of Darkness in storylines. He was a living monument who could make even the toughest men bow their heads in respect. Andre the Giant, the Colossus everyone feared. No discussion of untouchable wrestlers is complete without Andre the Giant. Often remembered as a gentle giant, the truth was more complex. His kindness was reserved only for those he respected. For anyone else, the experience could be very different. Standing over 7 feet tall and weighing more than 500 pounds, Andre's size alone was enough to intimidate anyone. But what truly set him apart was his natural presence, the kind that could silence a room with a single glance. Legends like Hulk Hogan, Ted DiBiase, and Bret Hart all spoke about the deep respect, mixed with caution, they felt around him. Andre loved professional wrestling. Despite his infamous drinking habits, when he stepped into the ring, he gave it everything. To him, wrestling wasn't just a job, it was life. That's why he only respected those who shared the same passion and dedication. If he felt someone didn't value the business, he would make it known in no uncertain terms. One famous story involves Kamala. After a match, feeling disrespected by how Andre treated him, Kamala actually pulled a gun in anger. The situation could have ended in disaster, but instead, something unexpected happened. Andre began to respect Kamala afterward, and the two developed a better relationship. It showed that respect with Andre was hard to earn, but once given, it was meaningful. Like The Undertaker years later, Andre valued the integrity of the profession above everything. He wasn't interested in bullying the locker room or proving himself through pointless fights. He only displayed his toughness when he felt someone wasn't worthy of the business. Many wrestlers admitted that if Andre didn't like you, everyone backstage would know quickly, and you would never want to experience it. Andre the Giant was a living paradox, a terrifying force of nature, yet a warm colleague when he cared about you. That duality is why, even decades after his passing, his name is still spoken with both admiration and caution. He wasn't just a WWE legend, he was a symbol of power and presence that made the entire world acknowledge. Andre was one of the few men nobody ever dared to cross. New Jack Wrestling's living nightmare. If you had to name one wrestler who sent shivers through the entire industry, it would be New Jack. Not because of flashy moves or top-tier technique, but because of his sheer madness, both in character and in real life. He was the kind of man you never knew what he might do next. His childhood carved a darkness into him that never left. He watched his own father stab his mother, grew up in violence and crime, and even served prison time for armed robbery. Those scars didn't just shape a bitter man, they created a monster who carried the image of a gangster into the ring. For New Jack, the line between his persona and reality barely existed. He became synonymous with ECW, a company infamous for its blood-soaked, hardcore style. While he wasn't known for technical wrestling, fans remembered him for his chaotic brawling and arsenal of weapons, chairs, steel ladders, and even real knives. The danger with New Jack was simple. He wasn't just performing, he was living the violence. One of the most shocking stories was when he threw Vic Grimes from a scaffold over 40 feet high. This wasn't just a dangerous stunt, it was revenge. A year earlier, a botched fall from 20 feet had left New Jack with brain damage and partial blindness in one eye. When they met again, he openly admitted he wanted payback. When Grimes fell, death was only inches away. But that wasn't even his wildest moment. In another match, New Jack pulled out a knife and stabbed Hunter Red 9 times in the middle of the ring. Even worse, it wasn't planned. It all came from a few stiff punches that pushed him over the edge. Later, he bluntly said, "I just did what I felt like doing at the time." Red never pressed charges, since New Jack promised to turn it into part of the storyline, but the two never crossed paths again. His reputation spread so far that even WWE, who once considered bringing him in, decided it was too risky. A man willing to do anything, no matter the consequence, was impossible to control. In hindsight, avoiding him probably spared WWE from countless disasters. New Jack was never a role model, but he became one of the most talked about figures in wrestling history. With him, The line between fiction and reality disappeared, making him one of those rare names that both fans and wrestlers themselves simply never dared to mess with. Bruiser Brody, wrestling's Tower of Violence. Bruiser Brody is a name that still commands respect and fear. He wasn't just a legend of brutal wrestling inside the ring. Outside of it, he was the kind of man no one wanted to cross. What fans saw in the ring, wild aggression, raw intensity, untamed chaos, wasn't an act. That was who he truly was. Breaking into the business in the 1970s, Brody quickly built a reputation with a style that was unlike anyone else. While others stuck to rehearsed routines, Brody turned matches into real brawls. With his massive frame, wild hair, and predatory glare, he intimidated opponents and thrilled fans the moment he walked out. The audience loved his authenticity. His fellow wrestlers? They were never comfortable sharing the ring with him, because nobody ever knew if things would end as planned, or erupt into a real fight. What made Brody untouchable wasn't just his look or his style, but his attitude toward the industry's biggest power players. He refused to bow to anyone. If he felt he was being taken advantage of, he would tear up the script, walk out mid-match, or change things on the fly to show that no one controlled him. That stubbornness made promoters desperate to book him for ticket sales, yet terrified because he couldn't be contained. Outside the ring, Brody was no different. Known for his temper and physical confrontations, he carried himself like someone who feared nothing. Those who worked with him said the smartest thing to do when he was angry was to stay quiet and get out of his way. Even the so-called toughest men in wrestling didn't dare test his patience. But his life ended in one of wrestling's darkest tragedies. In 1988, while touring Puerto Rico, Brody was stabbed in the locker room by a fellow wrestler. The fatal wound ended his life and left the entire wrestling world in shock and outrage. His death is still remembered as one of the industry's most haunting moments. Though his career was cut short, Brody's legacy lives on. He became the blueprint for hardcore wrestling, inspiring stars like Cactus Jack and the ECW generation. Above all, he left behind the image of a fierce, unyielding man who feared no one. Bruiser Brody didn't need myths or exaggerations. His raw spirit and uncompromising nature made him a legend that nobody, inside or outside the ring, ever dared to challenge. Scott Steiner, Big Papa Pump, the real-life nightmare. Holla if you hear me. Scott Steiner's signature catchphrase was never just a way to hype up the crowd. It was more like a warning to anyone who dared get close. With his explosive temper, brutally blunt mouth, and a body that looked like it came out of a lab experiment, Steiner wasn't just another wrestler. He was a living nightmare for opponents inside and outside the ring. Scott began his career alongside his brother Rick Steiner, and together they became one of the most destructive tag teams in history. The Steiner brothers dominated WCW, WWE, New Japan, and TNA, leaving chaos everywhere they went. While Rick had a reputation for toughness, it was Scott who struck real fear. Branded the Big Bad Booty Daddy, he was remembered not only for devastating suplexes but also for his unpredictable, volatile personality that could erupt at any time. Throughout his career, Steiner became infamous for showing zero restraint. He once cursed out Ric Flair and J.J. Dillon live on television, shocking both fans and fellow wrestlers. Off the stage, he clashed with Georgia police. But his most notorious incident was a backstage brawl with Diamond Dallas Page, triggered by tension involving DDP's wife, Kimberly. Witnesses claimed Steiner tried to gouge out Page's eye, turning the fight into a near-criminal assault. What made Steiner terrifying wasn't just his aggression, it was his resilience. Twice, he nearly died from life-threatening injuries, yet came back quickly, looking even bigger and acting even crazier. Many believed Steiner simply didn't know what fear was. In 2015, WWE even banned him from the Hall of Fame ceremony, worried he might attack his longtime rival Hulk Hogan. And even now, well into his later years, Scott Steiner still radiates the aura of a man no one dares to provoke. By his own famous math, the chances of him destroying an opponent are always more than 141.23%. With unmatched confidence, steel-like muscles, and a wild temper, Scott Steiner remains the ultimate example of a man nobody wanted to mess with. Jack Swagger, from All-American Champion to MMA Warrior. Before fans came to know Jake Hager as the cold, no-nonsense powerhouse in AEW, he made his name in WWE as Jack Swagger, a standout with a world-class amateur wrestling background. A true All-American, He set records for pins at the University of Oklahoma and even played football for the school, proof of his athleticism and relentless drive. The man who spotted Swagger's potential was legendary commentator and talent scout Jim Ross. Under WWE's banner, Swagger may not have always been at the very top, but he built an impressive resume. ECW champion, world heavyweight champion, and a locker room presence that commanded respect. Still, instead of clinging to WWE stardom, he took a daring leap, leaving it all behind to step into the cage of MMA. After parting ways with WWE, Swagger signed with Bellator, one of the toughest MMA promotions in the world. Here, there were no scripts, no staged drama, only real combat. Hager proved himself immediately, winning his debut fights with dominant wrestling control, executing takedowns and holds with textbook precision. One bout ended in controversy after he landed repeated strikes to a sensitive area, but instead of backing down, he showed unflinching determination to keep fighting anyone in front of him. What set Swagger apart was his understated demeanor. He didn't need to boast or put on a show. His strength and skill spoke for themselves. From the bright lights of WWE, he willingly walked into a cage where no crowd reactions or scripted outcomes could save him. Jake Hager's MMA career continues, but the fact that he dared to step into the steel cage, and won, proved he was far more than just a sports entertainer. Jack Swagger showed the world that in real life, he is a warrior no one should ever underestimate. Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man. That nickname wasn't hype, it was cold reality. Ken Shamrock became known worldwide as one of the pioneers of modern MMA while bringing a brutal, no-nonsense fighting spirit into WWE. His career was built not only on spotlight moments but also on countless real-life battles. Shamrock's childhood was anything but easy. Born into poverty with a broken family, he ran away before turning 15. At times he slept in cars, and he once nearly lost his life after being stabbed. Those hardships forged a man who was hardened, cold, and unwilling to back down from anything. He began his combat journey in Japan, where he wrestled professionally and competed in MMA. This unique experience gave him the perfect foundation for UFC's early days. Once the cage door shut, Shamrock didn't just compete, he dominated. As the first UFC Superfight champion, he became the face of real combat, known for vicious submission holds and an unbelievable ability to endure punishment. When he transitioned to WWE, Shamrock was never dismissed as just an MMA guy trying to fake it. Instead, he brought a raw, intense, and authentic edge that left fans uneasy in the best way possible. During the Attitude Era, he rose quickly, winning the Intercontinental Championship, becoming King of the Ring, and establishing himself as a key figure during WWE's wildest years. Yet at WWE's peak, Shamrock walked away. He left the bright lights to return to MMA, where there were no scripts, only blood, sweat, and survival. Though age and injuries eventually slowed him down, Shamrock never stopped fighting, embodying the spirit of defiance. Honored in the UFC Hall of Fame, Ken Shamrock is more than a great fighter. He represents an unbreakable will, rising from hardship to become an enduring icon in both MMA and professional wrestling. Steve Williams, Dr. Death, the unyielding warrior. Steve Dr. Death Williams' WWE career is often overshadowed by his loss in the infamous Brawl for All tournament, but reducing his legacy to that moment is unfair. Long before WWE, Williams was already respected as one of the toughest men professional wrestling had ever produced. His athletic resume alone commands respect. A four-time All-American wrestler and a member of the storied Oklahoma Sooners football team, where discipline and intensity were unmatched. That dual background molded Williams into a powerhouse, explosive, durable, and capable of dismantling anyone. If his reputation in the US sometimes flew under the radar, in Japan he was celebrated as a legend. In All Japan Pro Wrestling, where realism and toughness were prized, Williams thrived. Alongside Terry Gordy, he formed one of the most feared tag teams in history, overwhelming opponents with raw strength and relentless offense. American fans remember him from WCW, and at one point WWE even planned for him to feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, a dream match that never happened due to his Brawl for All injury. Still, the fact WWE trusted Williams as a top contender proved how much respect he held in the industry. Williams' legacy, however, went far beyond titles. His resilience was legendary. In one match, his eyelid was torn so badly it required 108 stitches, yet the very next day, he was back in the ring. For Dr. Death, blood wasn't a reason to stop, it was proof of his toughness. The nickname, Dr. Death, wasn't just for show. It embodied his iron will and refusal to surrender. Even when battling terminal throat cancer, Williams fought until his final breath. On December 29, 2009, he passed away, but the memory of an unbreakable warrior, a man no one dared challenge in real life, lives on forever. Those were the real warriors, the ones nobody dared to mess with in real life. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to Wrestling Sphere so you won't miss out on more incredible stories.